the podcast. You know what? I forgot to do my normal hello, everybody, and welcome to In This Corner of the podcast. I think we're on a buck 81. Boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments, greatest nicknames. Why did I throw that in? Why did I add that? You'll see in a moment. Anyway, we got a lot of stuff to talk about, although it'll primarily be in just a couple of subject matters. One of them will be about boxing's greatest nicknames. And before we get to that, we'll talk a little bit about the fights you'll see tonight. Mario Barrios taking on King Ryan, who will be going for a 27th world title opportunity. I'm kidding a little bit, but why I reference that, Lee Groves will explain in just a moment. And there he is from Friendly, West Virginia. He is a boxing writer, a boxing author, a CompuBox counter, a historian. What am I leaving out? I must be leaving out a few things. But there he is. Lee, do you have a nickname?
I don't really have a nickname, but when I took part in an exhibition, or not exhibition, but a charity thing for ESPN about 20 years ago, I decided to give myself the nickname the Red Menace because of my red hair, but it ended up being a menace to myself because I lost the fight.
And I've seen you fight, and I would say Dennis the Menace is more of a more apropos. Hey, but at least you climbed in there with no damn experience,
Right.
and attempted it. That was before Smitty gave you a few pugilistic lessons. If you had had 1 week, maybe 2 weeks to be with me, you would have whooped his ass. Whose ass would you have whooped? Who was that?
His name was Dale Stewart. He was a fellow punch counter when we worked at ESPN. We were relatively the same age, but he was much more athletic and it turns out much more experienced.
Yeah, experience matters. So we're going to talk about all of that. In fact, I got so many doggone nicknames and stuff here, and we're going to have a little fun with this.
Yeah.
So let's go to a break, come back and talk about Barrios and Garcia right after this.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner, the podcast, a buck 81. Lee Groves has a plethora of pugilistic stuff to talk about. Not only the main event tonight, Barrios and Ryan Garcia, Mario Barrios, Ryan Garcia, but the undercard. So I will flip it to you. Take it away.
All right. Well, this is going to be a 5-fight card in total. And the first fight is between Bektemir Melikuziev and Sena Ekbeko. Melikuziev is nicknamed Beck the Bully because of his aggression. And he's one of boxing's most ferocious body punchers. In fact, many of his 10 knockouts in his 17 fights have been produced by body shots. And as for Ekbeko, he has skills, and on the right night, he has pulled off upsets, most notably a 10-round decision over the then 16-0 Isaiah Steen back in 2022. But Ekbeko's 5 years older at 34. He's lost 2 of his last 3 fights, both by second-round knockouts against David Morrell and Osli Iglesias. And he's coming off a 15-month layoff as well. I'm picking Beck the Bully to win by TKO. The next fight up involves someone we had on our show not too long ago, Frank Martin. And we talked to him just before his fight with Gervonta Davis. And while he fought well against Tank, he ended up being stopped in round 8. Since then, he's fought once, and he looked terrific in stopping Rances Barthelemy in round 4. Albright is coming off back-to-back fights against members of the Davis family, a no decision against Keyshawn and an upset majority decision against Kelvin. Now, after the fight with Kelvin, Albright was jumped by Keyshawn and his other brother, Keon, in the backstage area. These are 2 skilled guys, but I think Martin is a bit more so, and I'm going to pick Martin by decision. The next fight up features a great clash of styles. Richardson Hitchens versus Oscar Duarte for the IBF 140-pound title. Um, Hitchens is a long-range boxer with sneaky power. Duarte is a power-punching aggressor. Duarte will likely be the crowd favorite because of the way he fights, but Hitchens is the betting favorite because he is just feasted on guys who come at him, especially those with defensive issues like Duarte has. I think Hitchens will box his way to a pretty decisive decision victory. And then the co-main event. This fight between Gary Antoine Russell, who holds the WBA title at 140, and Andy Hirooka. This fight was originally scheduled for the Jake Paul Gervonta Davis event last November, but it was postponed because of Tank's legal issues that eventually tanked the entire show. This could end up being the fight of the night because both men are big punchers and both are offensive minded. Russell's coming off the best performance of his pro career, a unanimous decision over Jose Valenzuela that won him the WBA title at 140. And Hirooka, who has been the WBA's mandatory challenger since September 2024, he's 24-0 with 19 knockouts. Good record. He has a 10-fight knockout streak, even better. But that said, Hirooka is coming off a 17-month layoff, and Russell has fought 4 championship caliber opponents to Hirooka's 0. So I'm picking Russell by TKO in a pretty fun fight. Smitty, do you have any comments about this undercard at all?
Actually, you laying it out to the fans and you laid it out to me the other day. Seems like I think it's going to be a pretty interesting undercard, some good competitive matchups, some good stylistic matchups, and makes for, I think, fan-friendly and viewing-friendly pugilism. So I think all in all, that'll be a good table setter for what we're going to talk about now, which will be the main event. And, you laid it out and illustrated it to me so well the other day that and there's more than just to talk about Barrios and Garcia and your breakdown of it, but the setup of it. I think fans really need to be told the truth, because I don't know on the telecast, will they be told what you're going to tell us right now, which is,
I think we both agree that Ryan Garcia is wholly undeserving of this world title opportunity. But I think he's getting it because there seems to be a maniacal desire by those who run this sport that Ryan Garcia should be the next face of boxing. With Canelo Alvarez having lost to Bud most recently, and he's getting up in age, that baton needs to be passed soon. And at least on the surface, Garcia seems to be the perfect guy to take that baton. He's young, he's good looking, he's charismatic, he has talent, he's a lively interview, and he has a large presence on social media. These are the qualities needed to become a breakthrough star these days, and boxing is in dire need of a breakthrough star. And on the surface, he seems to have it all. But in order to complete the picture, he needed one last thing, and that's a signature victory over a marquee opponent. And if he wins a widely recognized world title in the process, all the better for him. By the way, Garcia briefly held a secondary WBC belt a few years ago, but he never got to defend it because he took a year-long break due to mental health issues. And believe it or not, the WBC stripped him of that title during what was Mental Health Awareness Month. Not very good move by the WBC. This fight on Saturday marks the fourth, to establish Ryan Garcia as the new face of boxing. The first was when he fought Gervonta Davis. Davis at the time held a secondary lightweight title, but that belt wasn't on the line because it was fought at a catchweight. But if you recall, part of the buildup of that fight was that the winner would be deemed the new face of boxing. Tank knocked him out in round 7, and in a way, he did become the face of U.S. boxing because really ever since, his career as well as his life has gone sideways. The second attempt was when he fought Devin Haney, another reigning world title holder, as he was the WBC champ at 140. Garcia missed weight by more than 3 pounds, and because of his antics before the fight, He entered the arena as the villain. He was booed. But then the crowd suddenly shifted toward him the moment he hurt Haney with his first left hook. And when he was declared the winner, he was on top of the world. He received kudos from the press and from social media, and boxing celebrated the birth of a new star, even though he didn't win a belt. He didn't need it. Unfortunately for Ryan, that status lasted only a few days because then the failed drug tests came out and he was suspended for a year and he paid a fine and he lost all the momentum that he had collected by beating Haney. The third attempt was his most recent fight, and that was against Rolly Romero for a secondary WBA welterweight title. Garcia came into this fight as the A side of the main event. This was the Times Square card. And he was brought in, instead of a taxi like everybody else, he was brought in in a Batmobile of sorts. He was the star. All he had to do was win. Heck, both of us said on the show that the only way he was going to win a title was to go through Raleighville. Well, guess what? Raleigh beat him, and he beat him pretty badly. Now, normally the first failure would have forced a fighter to go to the back of the line. But because Garcia has this thing called star power, he's getting a fourth chance. And this time it's against Mario Barrios, a guy who's coming off back-to-back shaky draws. Because of those last two performances, Garcia, as of this morning, is a minus 225 favorite to win. Smitty, what are your thoughts about all of this?
Well, I I think I've chronicled over the last whatever years, what I think about Ryan Garcia. A one-trick pony. We know what the trick is, the left hook. He hasn't improved one iota. And, unlike a Jake Paul, he is he did come up as a real fighter, had a pretty good amateur career, was being brought along as a professional, but somewhere along the line, and maybe it was even at the beginning, it's one thing to become a professional fighter like I did. It's another one to be born one. Yeah. Where you're not manufactured and you have the internal stuff. I could throw a pretty good right hand and knock a few guys out, and I had a great left jab, but I didn't have the intestinal fortitude of a great fighter. And I don't think that, Ryan ever had that. And his skills, again, have not improved. The level of competition has gone up, kind of, although it's been all over the place. Mm-hmm. 3 is usually the charm. I don't know where will the 4th be. You and I talked earlier today. There have been other fighters in boxing history. It's actually replete with guys who've been given a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th. I mean, Mike Tyson, who proved himself, youngest heavyweight champion ever, was considered by many to be on a path to be the greatest heavyweight ever. Then he went through all the issues inside the ring, outside the ring, a little bit of both, and he kept getting opportunity after opportunity. I know you can recall some others, fighters who have been, I think you mentioned Yaki Lopez, I think was the one and who've been given, but they kind of got it, especially Lopez, they kind of got it and earned it the right way. I think there's a right way and a wrong way to get it. To just be handed it to you on a silver platter, to me, diminishes what it should take to get back in line and earn that shot. When you've been given that shot and you failed, then, go back in line, because what about all the other guys who have waited for that opportunity? But having said that, what do you think is going to happen when the two climb inside the squared circle for 12 rounds for Barrios' title?
Well, it's been a while since I've done this, but yeah, that's right. Tornado warning. And you know what that means? That means that the conditions are present for an upset to happen. I mentioned earlier that Ryan Garcia is a minus 225 favorite to win this fight, but I'm picking Barrios to win, and here's why. Normally, Garcia is usually the taller guy with the longer reach, but against Barrios, he will have neither. Barrios stands 6 feet tall. He's 3.5 inches taller than Ryan, and he has a 1 inch longer wingspan. And more importantly, he knows how to use both of those advantages. Here's the proof. In his last 5 fights, Barrios averaged 8 landed jabs per round. That's excellent. And the jab made up nearly 63% of his total output. So he knows how to fight a jab, a stick and move fight plan. I think that's ideal against Ryan Garcia, who's you're going to force him to come forward. You're going to force him to be aggressive. And we all know his technical flaws. He leaves himself open for stuff. Second, judges are impressed by superior output, and Barrios is way ahead of Ryan Garcia in that regard. In his last fight, Barrios has averaged 54 punches thrown per round, while Garcia has averaged just 27 in his last 5. That's 2-1. If that happens again, he could steal some rounds just by out hustling Garcia. And if he employs the stick and move strategy, he can pile up the points while also protecting his vulnerable chin. He's been down a few times lately in his last fights. Third, while it's true that Barrios is coming off the fight off back-to-back draws, the statistics indicate that Barrios should have won both of those fights. He landed 75 more total punches than Ramos did, Abel Ramos. He landed 14 jabs per round in that fight, and he outlanded him in 10 of the 12 rounds. And as for Pacquiao, he outlanded him by 19 total punches, and he led 7-4-1 in the round-by-round breakdown of total connects. But he, like everybody else, was in awe of the 46-year-old Pacquiao, who fought far, far better than anyone could have expected him to do, while Barrios didn't rise to the bar that was set for him. I think that hurt him with the judges. He will definitely not treat Garcia with that same respect, and because he has something to prove, I think he will be focused and prepared. And then finally, the Joe Goossen factor. Goossen was Garcia's chief second for 3 fights before they split up after the Gervonta Davis fight. Joe knows Ryan's strengths, he knows his weaknesses, and he's a good enough communicator to relay that information both in the gym and in the corner. Now, I recognize Garcia will be dangerous every second of every round, especially with that left hook. But if he fights the right fight, he's more than capable of winning this on a decision. But he must be aware that because of Garcia's star power, he must start this fight as if he's already 3 points down on the scorecards, because if he is to win on points, he's going to have to do so decisively. That's my thoughts.
Yeah.
What are yours?
Spoke to Joe. I had a couple of conversations with Joe Goossen, as you know, over the last few days. We were working to get him on here on this show, but he wasn't able to fit it into the schedule. It seems like as they should be, taking this fight very, very seriously. I was at the Barrios Pacquiao fight, and it was just a thing of the body language and the overall demeanor of Barrios was just almost acquiescent. He was acquiescing to Manny because he probably grew up idolizing Manny Pacquiao, and it showed. And in a negative way, you're right. Probably statistically, he should have been given the decision in that fight, but it was the language, the body language, and everything. I don't know how many more chances Ryan's going to get. All I can say is, for me, what he has represented for the sport that I've been involved in since I was, just a kid, is not a good thing. I don't like what he represents. He's just so much about social media, and he says whatever he has to say to garner and gather the clicks, and he's way more interested in clicks and hits than he is improving his skills inside the squared circle. So I would just say that I typically don't really too much root for a fighter unless they're a friend of mine, but I will be rooting for Barrios just because I think he is a better representation of what I know boxing to be than Garcia. And one might say, well, you're always complaining about boxing and you wanted to get it back to where it was. Well, Ryan Garcia ain't where it was, not in any kind of era that I've been in. And, when I think about fighters, whether it be somebody like a Charlie Burley or a Harry Greb or an Ike Williams or, I never did a show with Arguello, all the way to the guys. I haven't done a show with Inoue yet or Lomachenko yet. Those are all guys I would get excited to get into the ring with and talk about not only their career, but their in-ring, what they do and what made them so great. And with Ryan, what would we talk about? A left hook. Just a left hook. That's all he's got. Yeah, he can throw a jab and he can throw a right, but he's, left hook centric, much like Deontay was right hand centric. And if you noticed, really, to be honest with you, Wilder never improved, and Garcia has not improved. So having said all of that, I hope your tornado warning. You don't normally root for a tornado because they do a lot of damage. Yeah. But I hope that Barrios does a lot of damage to him and the Ryan Garcia thing goes away. Hey, and you know what? If he were to lose and changes his attitude, his demeanor, go back to the gym. He's still how old is he now?
I think he's 28.
And go back and say, okay, I'm going to get back in line and earn it the hard way. Fine. Anybody, we are great in this country, especially of forgiving people.
Right.
And giving them second chances, third chances. He's already up to like number 4. Right. So we'll see. But yeah, I would like to see your tornado warning come to fruition in this fight. All right, we're going to go to a break, change the subject, and talk about great boxing nicknames. Well, maybe not even just great boxing nicknames. Before I go to the break, I was thinking about just nicknames, and we'll talk about some of these in other sports. And I thought about Evel Knievel. Really? And do you know the story about Evel Knievel and how he got his nickname?
No, tell me.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to find it here. So Evel Knievel was born Robert Craig Knievel, October 17th, 1938 in Butte, Montana, after a police chase in 56 in which he crashed his motorcycle. Knievel was taken to jail on a charge of reckless driving. When the night jailer came around to check roll call, he noted Robert Knievel in one cell and William Knofel in another. Knofel was well known as Awful Knofel. Awful rhyming with Knofel, so evil began to be referred to as Evil Knievel, evil rhyming with Knievel. He chose this misspelling because of his last name and because he didn't want to be considered evil. There you go. Evel Knievel, who I had on my radio show back in the day. And you remember Robbie Knievel.
His son.
I had him on as well. I'm shaking my head because I drank with both of them, and both of them, wow, had long nights. And one of them, I think with Robbie, it was in Cape Coral, Florida. But anyway, that has to be one of the great nicknames in all of sport. We'll come back and talk about some of the great nicknames in boxing right after this.
I got 2 options. Option 1, I can accept defeat. Option 2, I can get up, I can get tougher, I can get faster, I can get stronger, and then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner, the podcast of Buck 81, chatting with the Grovester, Lee Groves. That's one of the nicknames I've given him.
Really?
And we were talking about, well, I just made it. It sounds good.
Oh, okay.
We were talking the other day about how boxing way more than any sport, has lent itself to great nicknames. It's an individual sport. It's a sport with a lot of character, the good, the bad, the ugly. And
Right.
so we were talking about that. By the way, my favorite boxing nickname's kind of a simple one. I got it on. Beck the Bully would like this shirt. This is the
Yeah.
body snatcher, of course, Mike McCallum. Mike McCallum, you're looking at pictures of me inside the squared circle with a fighter who really is one of the great fighters of all time, the late great body snatcher Mike McCallum. But when you think of nicknames, and of course, other sports, let's see, the NFL, you got
Right.
Bullet Bob Hayes, Prime Time Dion, Broadway Joe, Sweetness, Walter Payton, NBA has a ton of them, Black Mamba Kobe, Dr. J, Julius Irving, Air Jordan, of course, Michael. Major League Baseball, the Babe. We knew who Ruth was, the Splendid Splinter, Ted Williams, Hammer and Hank. You got some that they weren't as great a player, but their nicknames was great. Mark Bird Fidrich. I don't know if you remember him.
I do remember.
And then you go to some of the in hockey. Well, hockey has some. I guess. What are a few in hockey that you? Because you know you're a big
Well,
hockey fan.
the first one was Boom Boom Jeffrion,
Hmm.
who is a part of the Montreal Canadiens, I believe.
The great
You know,
one.
the great one, Wayne Gretzky, the
Yeah,
kid, Sidney Crosby for
yeah,
the team that I root for, the Pittsburgh Penguins.
yeah.
Yeah, those are ones
And
that immediately jump to mind.
in other sports like in golf, obviously Tiger, the
Mhm.
Golden Bear, Jack
Right.
Nicklaus. Hey, remember the Walrus?
Yes,
Craig,
Craig
Craig
Stadler.
Stadler. Of course, Arnold the King. Super Mex was Lee Trevino.
Love him.
I've interviewed him before. Tennis, the Swiss maestro was Roger Federer.
Hmm.
Um,
Muscles.
Rod Laver was the Rocket.
Yeah.
Super Brat, Johnny Mack, John
Yeah.
McEnroe. Tom, by the way, Tom Weiskopf in golf has a nickname of somebody we'll be talking about, probably have back on the show, the Towering Inferno.
Yes.
Was
The same
Tom Weiss?
nickname as Sebastian Fedora.
Yeah. So you have them in all sports, but no sport, none, zero, has the plethora of pugilistic nicknames as does boxing. Fighters, the most common and uncommon of all athletes, as I like to call them over the years. And so I've led us into this segment, and I'll let you take it now.
Well, what makes for a great nickname? I think that there has to be an element of truth, whether it be like where you're from or how you fight, your temperament inside the ring, or something about you that is obvious to other people. And we brought up Sebastian Fundora. He's called the Towering Inferno because he's 6'6" and weighs 154 pounds. And also, a great nickname, I think, has to be given by somebody else because most people aren't self aware enough to capture how other people perceive him. But one guy who tried to do it was Wilfred Benitez, who not only gave himself one nickname, he gave himself three. One was the Dragon. Another was the Bible of Boxing. That's the nickname of Ring Magazine, by the way. And Radar because of his great defensive skills. None of them really stuck, but he gave it the good old college try. Now, both of us go by names other than the ones on our birth certificate. You are James Edward Smith, right? And and people know me as Lee, but that's actually my middle name. I was named after my father, Gary, but nobody calls me Gary. But who gave you the nickname Smitty? And to you, how does that nickname capture the essence of who you are? Because there are a lot of James Smiths in this world, and there are a lot of people named James Smith who are nicknamed Smitty, but you are the only Smitty in boxing, and you have really capitalized on that name.
Yeah, I have no all I remember. There's a lot of Smiths, but there's only and there's a lot of guys who've been called Smitty. But most people who meet me will say from the moment they meet me, there's only one Smitty. And as you'll see, I'm looking at him now, but we'll put him on the screen. During my illustrious pugilistic career, when I fought some of these, I know Hank Kaplan did. I don't know if Chris Dundee had any part, but you see there they just put Smitty. And
Yeah.
when they introduced me, when the ring announcer, I think Frank Friedman was one of them that introduced me on Miami Beach or in Fort Lauderdale or in West Palm, wherever I fought during those years when I fought professionally back in the early '80s, I was just referred to as Smitty. But the simple answer is that there's so many Smiths, and I was just referred to as Smitty. And when I tried to change it, in the sense that I tried to go more by James Smith, my real close family members and friends back from who knew me from elementary and all that called me Jimmy Smith.
Mhm.
But I even tried to put James Smith, but it just Smitty. Every guest that would come on, Smitty, and so just it just works, and so that's where Smitty came from.
Well, that's a good story. And what are your favorite nicknames? I think one of them is on your shirt
Yeah,
right
yeah. Well,
now.
the body snatcher is just the obvious one. Just and you see one of my favorite movies. You see the box there from that's from one of my favorite movies that's in the other room, The Body Snatcher. But I have a lot of them, but another one's from a great friend of mine, the Pocket Rocket,
Hmm.
Wayne McCulloch. And
Okay.
I asked him the other day about that. So I'm sure he's told it before. He said when a friend of his, I think in Ireland and from Cork, gave him the nickname because Wayne was about 105 pounds at the time and said, he said, "Hey, you could fit in my pocket and you fight like a rocket." Wayne throwing the all the punches that he would throw. In fact, I think you uncovered that he had a record, I think, of sort.
He did, and he mentioned a fight of his in which he said that he threw 245 punches in a
Yeah.
single round, which would have superseded the official CompuBox record. Well, I got the footage of the fight, I counted it, and yes, he indeed threw 245 punches in a round, and that is the official CompuBox record for most punches thrown in a round. So,
You know,
congratulations to our friend.
and another guy, I knew him right there before before he was the greatest. I kind of like the Louisville Lip.
Yeah.
I thought that was a fantastic nickname for Muhammad Ali, but I know you have prepared a whole lot of others.
Well, yeah, you asked me some of my favorite nicknames, and the first that popped to mind was Juan Lascano, who was known as the Hispanic causing panic. I love that nickname. It's original. There are too many nicknames that are kind of bland. I love that nickname for its originality. I remember doing a story for Max Boxing about 20 years ago in which I went through a whole bunch of nicknames. And some that really came to mind was Irwin Suitcase Hines. Now, Hines wasn't exactly a well-known fighter. He was sort of a journeyman, but Suitcase, that is the perfect nickname for a guy who will go anywhere, anytime, and fight anyone. He'll bring a suitcase with him. Andrew Six Heads Lewis. Now, the story apparently there was that
I did one of
uh,
his fights.
oh, really? You did?
Yeah.
Cool. But supposedly the story that I heard about the reason behind the nickname was an opponent felt Lewis's power and he swore that he saw six heads, and so that really stuck. Darnell the Dingaling Man Wilson. I actually covered a couple of his fights for CompuBox, and obviously you get hit by that guy, your head goes ding-a-ling, right? Jerry Wimpy Halstead. He was a heavyweight of the I think 1980s or 90s, maybe 2000s. He called himself the best looking bald man on the face of the earth. And that's a very ironic nickname for a fighter. And then Roman Made in Hell Karmazin. He was
I
a
remember.
former 154-pound champion. He fought Corey Spinks, among others. And then James Bone Crusher Smith. And one year, Bone Crusher was doing a ringside lecture. I don't know whether you were doing it, but I raised my hand and I asked him, what is the origin story of your nickname? Because there's always an interesting origin story. And Bone Crusher looked at me and he says, I'll take you out back and I'll show you how I got that nickname. And then I got a laugh and everything, but that told me, okay, he doesn't want to say. So there you
But
go.
much better than him being called Smitty. You know,
That's true. It's true.
I think of I like Winky Wright. Who calls him Ronald? Winky Wright,
Nobody.
who could have been called the Road Warrior, but that was given to Glenn Johnson.
Mhm.
Ferocious Fernando Vargas.
Yeah.
That kind of fit his pugilistic style. And throw it back to you. There's so many of them.
You
The
know,
Brown Bomber, Joe Louis.
yeah, they're the classics. But there are just some fighters where when you say their name, you have to include the nickname with it. And one of them is Mark Too Sharp Johnson. Now,
Yeah.
Mark Johnson, how many Mark Johnsons are in the world? I think his real name is Marcellus Johnson. But Mark Too Sharp Johnson, that perfectly described his ring style and his accuracy and his scientific nature. And he was a great flyweight champion. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame not too many years ago. Rafael Bazooka Lamone. He was one half of the greatest fight that I have ever seen and ever will see, his fourth fight against Bobby Chacon. He was, let's just say he stretched the rule book to its absolute limits,
Yeah.
but he made it work. And of course, Mike the Body Snatcher McCallum, we discussed him. James Hard Rock Green, do you remember
Oh
him?
yeah. Was that
Five
was
foot
that back
five.
in the was that back in the Bump City Bumpus days
Yeah,
around
yeah.
Jeff Brophy from the Hall of Fame said that was his favorite Bump City Bumpus. Yeah.
Yeah, and also that era included Frank the Animal Fletcher. You cannot you cannot envision the memory of Frank Fletcher without the animal.
Yeah.
He had no teeth there in the middle, and all that, and he fought ferociously time and time and time again. And then there's the Bayonne bleeder, Chuck Wepner. You
Yeah.
just cannot say his name
From
without
Bayonne, what, New Jersey?
Bayonne, New
Which
Jersey.
leads
Yeah.
us to the Camden Buzzsaw, which was
Right.
Dwight Muhammad Kwawi, and sometimes the Bronx Bomber, but his best nickname was the Raging Bull,
Yeah.
Jake LaMotta. We had too many Rockies probably, but even Rocky is really a nickname.
Well, there's
Marciano
Rocky.
was the Brockton Blockbuster, but he was Rocky,
Yes, yes, he was.
and that wasn't his real name.
Yeah, yep. Rocky Castellani, who
Yeah.
was a middleweight from the Sugar Ray Robinson days. He actually fought Robinson, and he fought him very, very well, actually. So many
What
Rockies. And
about what
then,
about in today's era though, guys? Like the Monster. That's
yeah,
a great the great one. And Lomachenko's nickname is
well, it started out as high tech, but
yeah
then it sort of, later on in his career, everybody calls him Loma.
Loma. Yeah,
It's a great shorthand. There are ironic nicknames that don't exactly fit the fighter, but they stick because, well, maybe because it doesn't line up. At least during the later part of his career, Hector Macho Camacho. After he got buzzed by Edwin Rosario in that fight, he became not a boxer, but more of a runner, a survival minded guy. Macho didn't exactly fit, and in later fights, he was actually made fun of because he wasn't exactly macho in the ring, but he was macho in every other way,
yeah,
outside the ring and building up fights and stuff like that. Robert Grandpa Garcia, we know him as a trainer now, but he was a world champion in his 20s. And yet, despite being in his 20s, he was named Grandpa, maybe because he was wise beyond his years. That's certainly proving true these days. Ricardo Mayorga had the nickname of the Matador, but if you ever saw him fight, he fought more like a bull in a
yeah,
china shop. He
yeah,
just tore through everything. And then a guy that we both know, Eddie Gregory, now Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, but he was known as the Flame. And that didn't exactly fit either because he was a very cool and calculating guy. He was very serene
one
in
of
the
those
ring.
great light heavyweights. of the 80s. I mentioned, the Camden Buzzsaw, and there was a guy that was called the Jinx, or who brought the Jinx, and that's
Right.
Michael Spinks. The
Right.
Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya, is one of the great ones. And then there's fighters that had more than one, like Floyd Mayweather started out as Pretty Boy, then
Right.
morphed into what he's
Money.
Money, which he might have trouble looking for these days, according to some
Hmm.
of the reports. And then you got Iron Mike Tyson, who
Yeah.
changed it to Mighty Mike Tyson. I liked Iron Mike better. There
Yeah.
was a better ring about Iron Mike. As I flip it back to you for, and what about guys and even some great fighters of yesterday and today who don't have nicknames?
Right. We were discussing that the other day. The first name that came up, and you brought him up, was Bob Foster,
Yeah.
one of the greatest light
Woo.
heavyweights in history. Big bomber. He had the kind of power that would inspire a nickname, but for some reason, no, not so much. Shakur Stevenson doesn't have a nickname. Alexander Usyk, Dmitry Bivol, Artur Beterbiev, Mikey Garcia, who retired a few years ago. Great accomplishments, but no nickname. You brought up Ron Lyle, who was in that memorable fights with
With
Muhammad Ali
big
and with George
George
Foreman.
Foreman. Yeah.
One of the great Carlos Ortiz, one of the greatest lightweights in history, did not have a nickname. Tony Canzoneri, Ike Williams, who you mentioned earlier, Emil Griffith, Dick Tiger.
But
Uh,
Carmen Basilio of that era did,
yeah, the onion farmer.
right? Gene
Uh,
Fulmer. Gene
Gene
Fulmer.
Foreman. Yeah.
Was he like the fighting Mormon or something?
Something like that. And Charlie Burley, who you named your dog after,
Yeah.
didn't have a nickname.
Yeah.
And then female fighters, Katie Taylor and Michaela Mayer, Yokasta Valle, none of
The
those.
coal miner's daughter.
Now there were women with notable nicknames, and Christie's at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Clarissa Shields, who's going to fight tomorrow night, she calls herself the GWOAT, which is greatest woman of all time. Now I don't know whether she means it as the greatest female boxer of all time or the greatest overall woman of all time. The boxer, we can have a discussion. Greatest woman of all time? I don't know about that. I have some candidates beyond that. Amanda Serrano's the real deal. She named her. That's the same as Evander Holyfield's nickname. Ebony the Blonde Bomber Bridges. Gabriela Fundora is known as Sweet Poison. Alicia Baumgardner is the Bomb. Tierra Brown, who's a current world champion, she calls herself the Dark Menace. And Cherneka Johnson, who is an undisputed champion, she calls herself Sugar Neeks. So nicknames just goes through all strata, all every plateau, every
Yeah.
level that you could think of.
I cheated and looked for Fulmer, who I've had the pleasure of meeting on more than one occasion. He was called the Cyclone and I love this one, the Mormon Mauler, because he was
Ooh,
born in
yeah,
West Jordan, Utah. So
yeah.
yeah, those are
The
some.
Mormon Mauler, the Manasseh Mauler, Jack Dempsey.
Jack Dempsey. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
classic, classic.
we could go on and on and on, but I think, and that's one of the troubling things, and we're not going to get into it on this broadcast, is why you can't homogenize boxing
Mhm.
for all of its problems, for all of its woes. And it has many. I've said many, many times everything in boxing is backwards, but you don't want to take away from that.
Yeah,
And I'll just say it. We can talk about it on another show, but with what Zuffa is doing, it is. I think they're only three shows in, but what I feel that they're doing is trying to homogenize it, and what one of their sycophantic broadcasters keep saying about how this is so great and how he loves this. It's what he's always imagined. Not me, not in my eyes, and I don't think in most people's eyes in boxing. The solutions and things that we talk about is not really taken away from the individuality of the fighters. It's more just making sure that there's a consistency, that we get the best fighting the best, and that it's done right. And of course, we have talked about on this program about sometimes perhaps bringing some of the things back that made it great. And you got to be careful when and how you do that, but I think it can be done. For example, I still think there could be 15-round fights for mega fights. I do like the idea of going back to this, the same day weigh-ins and things of that nature.
Right.
But I really do believe that one of the things that has made the sport so special is the individuality of the fighters, because the thing that I don't know if somebody said it before me. Maybe they did. I was the first that I heard say it. You don't play boxing.
Right.
It's not a team sport. Yes, there's a little family, a fraternity. Sometimes it morphs into an entourage. But boxing pretty much is, the fighter and his immediate family, and then his family becomes his trainer, his cut man, his sparring partners, and what have you. And because I think that boxers, it's a lonely sport. What you're seeing with Ryan Garcia in a living room, in a beautiful white living room with marble, hitting not even a double in bag. I forgot, it's called the Cobra bag, some dumbass bag that he uses. That's not really it. It's dark and dirty and dingy, and I think it lends to when the fighter actually comes out from that dressing room, that's when I think a lot of them, especially the great ones, yeah, they're nervous. Some of them are even a little bit scared, but that's their moment. And I think that's what springs into when they come into that ring to be called Iron Mike or the Golden Boy or the or whatever. And I don't ever want to see that taken away from them, because if ever a sport needs to be able to show and display its individuality, it is boxers who literally are laying it on the freaking line when they go out there and fight. So that's why we kind of wanted to do this. And I hope, especially on yours, you probably, I try to answer people. Sometimes I do it on on the DM side of it, but I would love to hear. I bet you we left out a lot of nicknames, and I bet you we left out a lot of people's favorites. So, if you don't mind, I hope that they chime into your X account, or mine. Lee puts out some great clips when he's promoting the show. Usually, you do it, I think, on Friday night or Saturday morning.
Yeah.
But I hope you put out something where people can chime in and say hello to you, and also share with us their favorite nicknames, and maybe even fighters that we mentioned, like a Bob Foster who didn't have one. Give him one. Give us some nicknames, and maybe there's some fight. What should Shakur, Shakur Stevenson, what should his nickname be? What comes to my mind is something with a chess master or something like that.
Right.
Bobby Fischer-esque. None of
Grandmaster.
Right? Something like that. So I would love to hear more, but we wanted to sort of pay tribute to that because we were talking about it. And again, we obviously showed that other sports have, great nicknames too. But again, they all pale in comparison to the Sweet Science, which is the nickname, of course, for boxing. So any closing comments?
Yeah, actually, just to sort of put a bow on this show, on Saturday night, the main event will feature two fighters with nicknames. Ryan Garcia is known as King Rye. I don't know if that's really stuck, but that's what he's known by. And Barrios calls himself El Azteca, And we also want to mention two great fighters who will be celebrating birthdays on the day that this airs, February 21st. Sergio Maravilla Martinez, who will turn 51 today, and Carl the Jackal Frampton, who is now 39.
Yeah, I've had wonderful moments with both of those guys, interviewing both of those guys, especially Sergio, who one time pulled up a picture that had come out. the Messi, and he had his hair in a style like mine, and Messi showed me the picture, and it turns out that so many other people were sending me on X this picture of Messi and I where we both looked so much alike. And fortunately or unfortunately, we're the same stature. We're both short guys. He can beat my ass in soccer, but I bet you I could beat his ass inside the squared circle, although I wouldn't want to because he's love to meet Messi someday. What a fantastic. And does Messi have a nickname? I think he does.
I'm aware of. I'm sure he does, though.
Yeah. So somebody can share that with us as well. Anyway, good stuff. Look for the tornado warning tonight. Lee likes Barrios over Garcia. Enjoy the fights, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.